Hey everybody, Rob from Karma Common Chameleon coming at you with a couple of pro-revenge stories. First one, cheat on me with my best friend? I'll wreck your career and publicly humiliate both of you. Let's jump right in. Former best friend and former best friend's wife have been like family to my wife and I for several years, practically ever since we moved in across the street from them. The four of us were extremely tight. Our kids are the same age as theirs and all are good friends. We were one big family unit. We did dinner together a few times a week. We went on vacations together. I truly saw former best friend as a brother. And my wife and former best friend's wife were very close too. 5 months ago, I was completely blindsided by the discovery of an affair between my wife and former best friend. My wife had left her email open on our computer, and I saw an email from her to longtime therapists saying that former best friend would be joining her at an upcoming session again. WTF? My mind started racing. Why in the world would former best friend be going to her therapy sessions without my knowledge? I did a search and found some other emails to and from the therapist proving that former best friend had been going to sessions together with her for about 6 weeks. I checked our mobile phone account and discovered that, since late summer, they had been exchanging hundreds of texts every day, peaking at nearly 500 a day by the holidays. Speaking of the holidays, my wife and I hosted both of our families, parents, siblings, etc., for both Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, and former best friend and former best friend's wife joined us either for dinner or after dinner on both holidays. Text records showing that the entire time that they were at our house celebrating with our families, my wife and former best friend were texting each other across the room. They were doing that pretty much every time the four of us hung out for months. And all day, every day, just in general. But what bothers me the most is that they were doing it with former best friend's wife and I right there. I confronted my wife with the evidence, and she admitted that yes, she and former best friend had fallen in love. It just happened. I don't know how, but I love him and I just don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm sorry. They had gone on a school district trip together. Something had happened in her hotel room and things had moved quickly from there. She explained as I lay face down on the couch, unable to look at her, that they had already made plans to move out and divorce me and former best friend's wife. And while they didn't plan to move in together immediately because of the kids, they'd probably do so eventually. The meetings with the therapist were supposedly mostly for the purpose of finding a way to break this to me and former best friend's wife as gently as possible, because they were so very concerned for our well-being. Former best friend's wife and I are fairly certain that they weren't planning on telling us about the affair at all, and were simply going to discover their feelings for one another several months down the line after they'd come up with some other reason to divorce the two of us. My wife moved out 2 months ago. I was, and still am, utterly destroyed. I cry every day. I cried writing the first few paragraphs of this story just now. I worry non-stop about the impact on our kids. But I am also not exactly a shrinking violet when I feel like I've been wronged. And in this case, I was, objectively, very, very wronged. So, a couple of years ago, former best friend ran for a Board of Education seat as a pretty extreme underdog. I helped him with his campaign materials and debate prep, and my wife, a well-known school district employee, this becomes important later, got the word out as best she could. Much to our surprise, he actually won in a squeaker by just a few dozen votes. Being on the board became the center of former best friend's world. He joined every committee that he could. This turned into the foundation of his affair with my wife, as they were constantly going to school events and meetings together on evenings and weekends. Once I discovered the affair, my thoughts turned pretty quickly to revenge, and it occurred to me that an extramarital affair between a member of the Board of Education and an employee of the school district was at least bad politics and possibly violated district policy. Making things far worse for them was that my wife was in the running for an open administrative position, and everyone knew that she was more or less guaranteed the job and the major pay raise that came with it. She had just finished her master's degree in school administration at the urging of her principal and the superintendent so that she could be promoted to this specific position. I had plenty of evidence of the affair, texts from both of them admitting to it, text records showing that they were texting hundreds of times a day, emails to and from the therapist, etc. I considered simply emailing all of the evidence to the board and the superintendent, but felt like I, as the grieving betrayed spouse, might not be seen as a credible source. So instead, I invented a fictitious, furious friend who was planning on showing up to the next board meeting and publicly shaming the two of them for their affair. I told my wife that I'd tried to talk this person down, but couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't show up and humiliate them publicly. As I expected, this led former best friend to conclude that the only option was for him to preemptively admit the affair to the board. The superintendent subsequently recommended that former best friend resign, which he did. Former best friend's wife said that he was utterly humiliated and crushed, and barely got out of bed for a few days afterward. One word of the affair, and former best friend's resignation started getting around. The superintendent, a longtime friend of both my wife and former best friend, contacted my wife and tearfully informed her that it was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted to an administrative position within the district. The position had been lined up for her was later filled by an outside candidate. This sent waves of confusion and rumor throughout the district, as it was pretty well known that my wife was getting the job. The day after she was informed that she wasn't getting the promotion, my wife and I, despite our crumbling marriage, took our son out to breakfast together on his birthday, and a parent stopped by our table to congratulate her on her new role. She said thanks, then excused herself to go cry in the bathroom for a while. I let the dust settle for a couple weeks, and then, right before my wife moved out, let them in on my little secret. There was never a furious friend threatening to expose them in the first place, just me. Word of all of this has gotten around our fairly small town, which former best friend grew up in and my wife has worked in for nearly 20 years. My wife refuses to talk to me about how things are at work now, but I've heard from some people I know in the district that her formerly spotless reputation has taken a major hit. Former best friend, formerly a gregarious social presence in our neighborhood and at events and pubs in town, has completely gone underground and barely emerges to mow his lawn. He's moving out soon to a crappy little townhouse, which is all he can afford due to all the child support he's going to have to pay his wife. My wife and former best friend claim that they plan on trying to make things work together despite all the public humiliation. I wish them lots of luck with that. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun to show their faces together in town. Wow, this guy and the former best friend's wife really got screwed in this situation. Now, I won't lie, I was really hoping there'd be a little twist at the end where the former best friend's wife and OP got together themselves. Ah well. On to our next story. 3 strikes and you're out? Cool, I got this. Let's jump right in. I work in sales, and we work as a team. I have an assistant who helps me get leads and set appointments. Well, this particular assistant and I did not get along at all. This particular assistant kept going to my boss behind my back to report every little incident, which is really annoying. Part of my role as the senior rep was training. However, this assistant was a former business owner and knew how to do the job and didn't need no help. Well, the appointments the assistant set up had an 80% no-show rate, which is insane. In the past, no-shows would be around 25 to 30%. Not only that, this assistant would constantly argue and bicker over everything, which was really frustrating to deal with. This assistant also created their own lead card and tracking system, which completely sucked and crap fell through all the time. Furthermore, about half of all contact details provided didn't actually work, but what really irked me the most is this assistant constantly sucked up to my manager about all the great things they are doing. My manager was in love with the assistant and kept preventing me from firing the assistant and replacing them. Now, our company had a little known policy: 3 ethics complaints in a 12-month period and you're fired. Here's the deal though, for a customer to file a complaint, they had to go to a specific page on our website, so very few complaints ever got filed. One day, I roll in 10 minutes late. My assistant had called my manager to complain that I was late. My boss asked me why I'm late. Keep in mind, we didn't clock in or out, and I often would come in early or stay late. To come in late once in a while was no big deal, but it was annoying knowing my assistant had a habit of constantly going behind my back and ratting me out on top of their crappy production. We're supposed to be a team. I asked to do a review of the assistant's leads. We got 3 leads deep, and my assistant huffed and puffed and said the leads belong to them, not me, and it's none of my business. Actually, it is. They then called my boss to complain about my behavior because I was pushing them to complete the lead review. My boss called me, and I straight up told him he needs to give me the authority to fire this assistant, or I'm going to force his hand. He told me I needed to learn how to work with my assistant. So I pulled up all of the assistant's leads and began dialing. One thing that would justify an ethics complaint is opting in a lead for a call when they didn't want to be called, which I suspected I could find at least 3 instances of. I called all of the leads, and I got 9 people who straight up said, "We never intended to be opted in to be given sales calls," to which I replied, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. We actually have an ethics complaint page for such a situation. Would you like me to forward you the link so you can file a complaint? It would really help us ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen again." Within 48 hours, my assistant had gotten 5 ethics complaints. My boss called me 72 hours later. "Sting, it's really strange we've gotten a slew of complaints about your assistant. Did you have any part in this?" Well, you see, my assistant refused to conduct a lead review with me, so I called all their leads for them. On a few occasions, the lead claimed they didn't intend on providing their information for sales calls, so I simply sent them the link to file a complaint. My boss said, "Yeah, well, now I'm forced to fire the assistant." I simply smiled and said, "Oh, that's really unfortunate. I'm so sorry to hear that." He confided, "I guess you won this one." I said, "Not a problem. I'll go ahead and post the new job ad." My next assistant was much better and way easier to work with. One would think that if the person causing you the most trouble at work was your own personal assistant, that you'd be able to have a hand in determining what happens to that person. I applaud OP for the way he handled this situation, coming back with that sweet ProRevenge and getting a new assistant. Well done. Take a second, guys, to check out my friend, the Canadian Wolf Reddit. Link in the description below. He's just posted his first Reddit story. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comic Chameleon saying thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and share the video with your friends, or I'm gonna eat all the cookies. Na 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 na.